back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour is taking itself back out onto the road. I've made appropriate space in my belly for all these things that are going to be happening in the springtime. It's all presented by the Maryland Lottery. We'll be letting ourselves play at Mama's on the Half Shell this week, and then next week, I'm really looking forward to getting over to El Guapo or working on Margarita. And then we're going to be at Costas on the 18th and at Fadley's on the 23rd. Costas is going to involve a little bit of basketball as well. Don, we have defending champions around here. Been a little while since we had this guy on. He's probably going to get angry because it's about the fourth or fifth time we've had him on the show and haven't had a crab cake yet. Although we did go over to State Fair one day for breakfast. We did.
Yes,
Marc Steiner has the professorial look today. Have you noticed this, Don? You were the original teacher. He looks like the teacher. I feel like the student.
Professor Steiner. Any time that you have Marc Steiner, Center for Emerging Media, longtime Baltimore radio host, and is it philosopher king? I mean, we'll go to that when folks want to try to make sense of what is happening in this crazy world. They dial up Marc Steiner from beautiful northern Baltimore County. First of all, how pretty is it out there today, Marc?
It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. Except I've been feeding my dog and give her bones. You know, she loves bones, and they're in the yard. And my wife left this morning early. Valerie left early and left me a text saying, "Marc, clean up the blank bones. The vultures are taking over the yard."
Well, for those who don't follow Marc on social media, you should, if for nothing else, to look at the beautiful nature photos that his wife Valerie. I mean,
oh yeah,
Marc, this wasn't on the agenda, but how did Valerie get interested in that? I'll call it more than a hobby. She's a spectacular.
Yeah, no, it just happened. She just started taking photographs. She actually had a opening at the filling station, which is a local coffee shop around the corner. Sold out all of her photographs. I mean, yes, I keep telling you that's what you should be doing. Forget the rest of the stuff. Just take pictures.
Oh, they're stunning. They're just simply stunning. So tell her to keep up the good work. Well, Marc, we could do 2 hours. We're going to do about 30 minutes and we will have we'll have you back. But we can't begin without talking about Ukraine. I mean, Nestor and I, like the rest of the world, are despondent. I mean, I think that's the only word. We're despondent in being observers of what is taking place, and help us make some sense out of it, Marc. Or I know you're writing about it, you're studying it. Help our listeners sort through what's happening.
Talking to people in the Ukraine. I'm trying to get them on the air with me next week. It's a very complex and difficult thing. I don't know how far back do you want to go. I mean, Ukraine and Russia have been in this. I always call this kind of dialectical dance with one another from the beginning. You know, I mean, from the original Vladimir in 1600, who became a Christian and created modern Russia. And he's from where? Kiev. So, you know, and so today's Ukraine. But what we're seeing now is a couple of things going on from my perspective. First of all, let me just say something I have to say because it really strikes me that the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is the 21st century's first real hero in terms of how he's perceived by the world. A very brave man. It's also interesting that you and I know some Ukrainian friends are upset by this and some don't, but the Ukraine, like Russia and Poland, were the heart of European anti-Semitism that killed Jews, literally, over the years, pogroms and more. And they elected, by the most gigantic margin ever, a Jewish man as president of the Ukraine. Much like the United States, with its history of racism, electing Barack Obama as the first Black president of the United States of America. And I think that says a lot about where Ukraine has come to in terms of dealing with its own past and addressing what it is, who they are as a nation. So that was something I just had to say, because I've been thinking about that a lot. but what we're seeing here is a couple of things. One is the Putin's growth of the old imperial Russia. I always joke that Putin was always a closet capitalist inside of a Russian communist system. So he has built this world for billionaires inside of Russia, and built this imperial Russia, and wants back what was lost. And there was always a mythology Ukraine was independent because, remember, they had a seat at the UN. The Ukrainian SSR had its own ambassador at the United Nations, along with Belarus, which is Belarus. In this game of alleged independence that didn't really exist. So the Imperial Russia is going in. They've already taken Crimea. They've taken portions of it already that they say are part of Russia. And the other part that we don't talk about and don't like to talk about is that part of what's interested into this craziness is I think of it as the nuclear sword of Damocles hanging over the world at this moment. Is the West has to take some responsibility by pushing NATO to its borders. It's interesting. I was reading the getting on the New York Stock Exchange this morning and checking out stocks, that every major military company, Raytheon, all the rest, their profits are soaring through the roof because they're the ones building and supplying the weapons. We have to remember that. That's part of this too. So you can still support the Ukrainians' resistance and Ukrainian freedom, but understand the realities around it, and not just whitewash it all like the West is always the good guys and the East is always the bad guys. There's enough to go around here.
But Mark, you're not suggesting. I'm going to push back a little bit on that.
No,
you're not.
Would you really? You're going to push back?
Anybody who knows Steiner and Moeller know we must push back on each other every now and then.
I'll get a whistle.
You're not suggesting that NATO, prior to this invasion, had assumed an offensive posture towards Russia, thus bringing upon this invasion.
No, I would not say no. Yes and no. I think NATO does have an aggressive posture towards Russia.
Aggressive, but not going to invade.
Well, no, they're not going to invade. I didn't say, but when you have nuclear missiles on your border, look, both the United States and Russia, in different sets of negotiations, have walked away from ending nuclear proliferation. Russia as well, and so, and I don't know if I said what I just said would open up this bag of worms that maybe I shouldn't have opened up, because I'm not. The invasion of Russia, the invasion of Ukraine is the invasion of Ukraine. It shouldn't have happened. We have to support the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainians fighting back against.
What does that mean when we make lots of bombs and lots of weapons and put more money into our military than anything? And we're all sitting here and we're doing some nice things. We're praying. We're taking things and making them gold and blue on our Facebook to show support. These people are getting murdered.
But what would you do?
But it's nice to have. Well,
you send troops into the Ukraine.
Well, or we're going to watch them get murdered on CNN.
Yeah, but I mean, look, we're talking about the two major nuclear powers on the planet Earth. And
one of them has a crazy leader right now. We had our own crazy leader, who might be back again someday.
Who could be back? Who could be back?
But, it's amazing when the nukes thing comes up this week that Putin's crazy. He's going to nuke us. Trump was threatening everybody on Twitter on a daily basis, threatening little Kim Jong, and like Trump had his own. I have nukes and I'll use them. The rest of the world feared that. I guess deep down we thought somebody would stop him here if he wanted to nuke North Korea or something,
But I'm not sure that it's even possible that the United States can or should send troops into Ukraine. I don't think America would put up with it.
Well, then let's be prepared to watch, 20 million people get murdered. And you like Zelensky? You like him dead a week and a half?
Nestor, I think it's more. This is the discussion. I mean, I would imagine, in all honesty, this is the discussion that the president is having with world leaders, and certainly the president is having with his national security advisors. Go. I understand your emotional reaction, Nestor, but let's go back to what Mark said, because Mark, I think it's what makes the management of this crisis so difficult, because I'm where you are. So on this one, we are 100% in sync. I think Biden is spot on when he says we can't put feet on the ground, because then we are one bullet away from World War III with two superpowers with nuclear weapons. I think Boris Johnson is correct when he recognizes that a no-fly zone, as appealing as that may sound, is one plane being shot down from a nuclear war. So when we start knowing that the NATO powers recognize they can't engage face to face, and we have to fight through proxy by helping the Ukrainians. I guess what Nestor's frustration is, Mark, how does this play out? That's what's so challenging.
One of several things that's going to happen. First of all, Zelensky and the Ukrainians are very clear. They don't want foreign troops inside of Ukraine. He's not asked for that. They're not asking for people to put troops on the ground. They are asking for weapons. As he said, I don't need your plane ticket. I need, how do you put it?
Ammunition, not a ride.
Thank you. Thank you very much, brother. That was it. Yeah, ammunition, not a ride. That's what he said.
We're going to be using that the rest of our lives, right?
That's a great one.
I need ammunition, not a ride. I don't want you to carry me. I want to carry myself, right? Like,
but that's what they're saying. They don't want American troops or French troops or British troops in Ukraine. What this is going to happen one of two ways. I mean, either Russia's going to get bogged down, and I think even if they win, quote unquote, win the war, they're going to be bogged down in a war that's not going to end, just like Afghanistan. This is not going to end easily. And
these Ukrainian people aren't going to put a picture of Putin on their wall and call him their dear leader. They're not going to do that. That's very obvious.
No, the majority will not. The majority will not. What I'm saying is I think that there is no good ending to this.
Right.
Well, a bullet in the head of Putin might be a good ending.
That's not going to end it either.
Who steps in then? You know what I mean? Like, he's 73.
Lots of people could step in.
I mean, the ideology around him, which is 2 weeks ago, well, we just exercise troops from a KGB leader who poisons people and pushes people off balconies, right? Like the notion that he wasn't going to invade Ukraine lasted 72 hours or as long as our intelligence did, right? Like there's no honor in dealing with him, so he must be exterminated then. I mean, there's no other. It's either exterminate him or the Ukraine will be exterminated.
if you let's for argument's sake, you're right, and you somehow arrange the assassination of Putin, what is that going to change? That doesn't stop the war. That doesn't change the Soviet, the Russian government.
Well, what is taking away oligarchs' boats do? And more than that, I mean, the thing Monday morning, Mark, that blew me away was the first picture I saw of regular Moscow people going to work and showing up at the subway, and nothing works. Google Pay doesn't work. Apple Pay doesn't work. Their bank accounts don't work. The gas pumps don't work. Nothing works, right? They don't have money. So for the rank and file, if this thing does go on 3 months, 6 months to some degree, if the people of Russia will revolt on this, right? I mean, they're already out in the street.
Well,
and I know it's dangerous and they're going to get killed and there's revolution and all that. But this probably isn't going to go well for Putin over the next 10 years.
Maybe not. You don't know. I mean, I'm not prescient. I don't know what the hell's going to happen, but I do know. I mean, there's already an anti-war movement inside of Russia, and it's been out there every day. And people have been arrested and put in jail. All the independent media in Russia right now has been shut down as of this morning. I think the last vestige of an independent media was shut down today. So clearly, there's a lot of anger inside of Russia around this. Many people opposing this war in Ukraine. And I think we're going to see what happened to I think the Russian soldiers coming back are going to be part of what the hell are we there for? What are we doing? He has made a calculation is probably a huge mistake. I mean, because you bid off the Crimea, then you bit off 2 zones in Western Ukraine because they're Russian. And I think that he's stumbling now into a war that they did not expect. They did not expect the resistance that they've met among the Ukrainians. They did not expect it. And B, we have not yet seen the real firepower that the Russians have to use in the Ukraine. I mean, look what they did in Chechnya. Same thing. So, you know, that the firepower that is about to be unleashed on Kiev is like nothing we've seen yet. And it's really hard to see how this is going to end up. I think this is going to end up in a long-term conflict. Even if Ukraine falls, the conflict will continue on the ground.
Yeah, Mark, you've made several points that we can expand upon. I think the Zelensky moment is one of those ones that history books 100 years from now will be talking about, in this sense, in that I don't think anyone, probably including Putin, saw this coming. And it appears to me to be one of these historical truisms that every 60, 70, 100 years rears its head, in that the old cliche that the moment makes leaders and greatness. It's not a leader who makes greatness. It's the moment that allows certain, in this case, the Jon Stewart of Ukraine to become this leader with a steel spine that is inspiring a world. I mean, what does that tell us about leadership and individual resolve, Mark?
I mean, he is just, I mean, Zelensky to me is amazing. I mean, what he's done in terms of standing up and being a leader. These are the moments, as much as politically I dislike Churchill, and as much as my dear departed mother loved Churchill, she was a Brit who was an ambulance driver in World War II.
Be nice to Churchill. He was a journalist.
He was that too. He was a lot of things. But anyway, what he did is what Zelensky's doing now.
Right.
He became the embodiment of the resistance to the Nazis. Zelensky's the embodiment of the resistance to the Russian invasion. The fact he's standing up the way he is, that he's in a bunker, not leaving, he'll die there or go underground. I think we've created, as I said, we've created a 21st century hero. The situation has created a 21st century hero.
I was reminded, Mark, and there certainly are many things that George W. Bush and I disagree on politically and philosophically.
I know that's true.
When I watch Zelensky, and I am taken back to that Bush moment in the rubble of 9/11 with the megaphone saying to the first responders there, I hear you and the world will hear. In other words, it was a moment that took George W. Bush to a level that many did not think he had. There, sometimes people rise to these moments, right?
They do. And I think that somebody, look, I guess to put this in because it's part of it with Zelensky real fast. So I grew up in Baltimore, like you all did. In Patterson Park was a neighborhood when I was a little boy and when my father grew up in it. On the one side of the park, the north side of the park was Jewish. The south side of the park was Polish and Ukrainian. And the anti-Semitism was deep. So I grew up in a world where Ukrainians were seen, in my family, as the enemy. They wanted to kill us. Ukrainian Cossacks lopped off my bubbies, which is Yiddish word for grandmother, my grandmother's little sister's head when they ran from them in their shtetl. with a sword as she was holding her little sister's hand. That's what we grew up with. So now I think about this a lot, because here I am in 2022. And as someone say, as my doctor said, when I said to him, I'm getting old, he said, you know, Steiner, you are old. As an old man sitting here, supporting the Ukrainians and watching the leader of Ukraine as a Jewish man. That emotionally is a really different place to be than I was when I was young with my family. It just shows the fluidity of life and growth that happens. And, you know, the Ukrainians have only been really free and independent. They've been part of Poland. They were part of Lithuania. They were part of Russia. They've had few spurts where they were actually an independent people. But they've always had at least for the last 1,000 years or so or more, they've had their own identity as a people and their own language. And, you know, when you see things go on, like I saw pictures of Ukrainian anarchists and Ukrainian neo-Nazis, and everything in the middle, armed, standing together to fight the invasion. That says a lot about, I mean, who knows what's going to happen afterwards if they survive this, but that they all came together. When you saw Miss Ukraine wearing camouflage and holding a rifle, I mean, this is the entire nation. And so we have to support that. And I hear what Nestor's saying. And emotionally, look, man, I mean, I grew up in a world where if something went down in the street, you don't desert your friend. You stand and fight with them until the end, no matter what happens, because that's what you do. And that's kind of the ethic, the working class street ethic that we all, many of us had, right? But this is a difficult situation, because if we put troops in Ukraine, it could explode into something we can't even fathom.
Or we could let him take the Ukraine, and that could explode into something we.
No, it's not the same. They're different.
Yeah, I agree, Nestor. With
We're
Mark,
just going to let him have Ukraine, and then it's going to be okay
different.
after that.
It's very different, Nestor. I agree with Mark.
I don't disagree. I just see tanks. I see convoys of tanks coming in to murder people, and we're just watching it live via satellite, eating popcorn like Michael Jackson in the Thriller video.
Well, I guess, Mark, boy, we're not going to get to other topics, and that's fine.
I was all ready for something else too.
We will have you back. But you know, when Nestor reacts as he is, I am thinking back, and I have some thoughts, but I want you to talk about what's different. I do have some thoughts back to the late 1930s, early 1940s, when Americans, Roosevelt, the New York Times, and others watched what was happening to the Jews and just said, well, not much we can,
right.
And
well, the whole world's watching the Uyghurs right now in China. We don't talk about that much, right? But
say what?
China has concentration camps right now.
Right, but let's focus for a minute though on this Ukrainian situation, because what I hear in your question, Nestor, is can the West sit by out of its fear of nuclear annihilation and watch millions of people basically be exterminated? I hear his question, Mark. I don't have a great answer for it.
I mean, there's not a great answer for it. I mean, whether you're thinking about it strategically, militarily, or whether you're thinking about what it means to be in war, or know what it means to be in war, sending troops to Ukraine, I mean, people have, what we're saying when we say that, what that could mean. I mean, we need to support the Ukrainians. We need to give them what they need to fight this war. And if you really want to help the Ukrainians, then get up off the seat, take a flight to Kiev and join them. Fight. Go over there. If I was in 75, I might be over there fighting. I mean,
I saw a number this morning of like 16,000 different people that have volunteered to help them across the world.
I'm sure. I'm sure that's not. I'm sure that's the case. I have not read that, but I'm sure it's the case. I mean, I'm sure it's the case.
Did
The
Putin
issue
We're
is,
American. We don't
miscalculate?
like to watch people get exterminated. You know what I mean? We don't.
I don't think
Did,
they're going to.
did
They
Putin
could.
miscalculate, Mark?
Pardon?
Did Putin miscalculate?
Yes, he did. He had no. He thought they were going to roll right through. You know, and clearly this also showed some of the weakness in the Russian military coordination. People I've talked to who are in the military have all said that to a person, and they've also said it in different articles I've read. You know, that this really shows that the military in Russia does not have their act together. They thought one thing, they didn't coordinate airstrikes with tanks. There were all kinds of things they didn't do. You could tell from, at least they could tell from how this was being waged. And he didn't expect the resistance. I mean, the Ukrainians are resisting. Look, let me be clear. I mean, there is a right wing in Ukraine that is pretty scary. These are some neo-Nazi bastards. And they are in the military, and they're in the government, and they're in the police. But tellingly, they only got a few votes to get a few seats in the parliament. They didn't get an overwhelming voice in the parliament, but they're there. Unlike the United States, where you have 26 states that are controlled by the right wing. That didn't happen in Ukraine. I don't think this is going to end well for Ukraine. I don't see how they win it. I think I can
What
see a
does
war.
not end well mean, Mark? Does it mean that Putin is successful, Zelensky is dead or in exile, and a puppet government is installed? Is that what not ends well?
And to add to that, yes. And to add to that, there will be a continued resistance. That's not going anywhere, I think. This is going to become a huge thorn. You remember the Russians went to Afghanistan and they had to flee.
So if Pete Seeger were writing again, this might be Putin's Big Muddy. I mean, this is...
Yeah, that's right. Wait, you should put that song together with Bob Dylan's Masters of War.
Right.
That's on our next episode, Mark.
What's that? Bob Dylan?
Music. Marc Steiner is here. Don Moeller is here. We are talking all things Ukraine and the war. Is there anything else that you wanted to get into this one, Don? You make
just
copious notes on these things, you know.
Before we let Mark run, because he's working on several major projects. I know you're spending a lot of time. We are going to have you back to talk about Baltimore, where it is, its future, because that's what we're all about. And right. I want your take on that. Certainly, before we let you go, we're not going to do a deep dive because it wouldn't do it justice. But you're taking a real look at something that really concerns me, and that is the rise of the right wing in the United States of America. And as we come on today, we've got the State of the Union just a few days in the rear view mirror, and we have two congresswomen screaming at a president of the United States in the middle of the State of the Union, and given a chance to think it through and roll it back on the one and only Laura Ingraham show a day or two later. Ms. Boebert says, damn right, I'd do it again. Mark, what the hell is happening to us?
Well, you know, I think we have to also think about this. Our country has been a really relatively conservative place for most of its life. You know, we lived in a period from Roosevelt in the 30s and the Depression to the early 70s, where we were building a different kind of America. We had the civil rights explosion and the change in the nature of voting. I mean, things changed in America in significant ways in that period. Unions were part of it. But the right from the early 70s, and one of the leaders of that, besides Vigory and others, was Powell, who ended up being on the Supreme Court, designed a plan to take it back, and they're doing it. I mean, they are better organized. Well, I always not laugh, in some ways laugh. We were the organizers. You know, people from the progressive end, we were the organizers in unions. We were the community organizers who built community power. They've taken a lesson from our playbook on how to organize, and we've forgotten how to organize. We can demonstrate in the streets, but we can't organize anymore. So they're taking over. They're taking over local school boards. They're taking over local town councils. They're taking over local planning. They're taking over people if they're elected to run the voting operations in the state. They're winning those elections. They've taken over 26 state legislatures and governor's mansions. So, and there are moves underway to ensure that they win the next election because of how they're going to gerrymander districts and ensure that the majority of people in Congress are on the right. Like take North Carolina, they cut Asheville in half to ensure that that region will not have a Democratic congressperson.
Did the same thing in Tennessee, Mark. Did the same thing in Nashville. You know, it's it's ridiculous.
So I mean, I think plus you have to realize that they are well armed. And people, good liberals and people on the left and moderates don't believe in guns and don't have guns and don't know how to shoot them. and the right does. I mean, they're prepared, and so I think we're in for we're in the midst of a real serious battle for the future.
Mark, I equate it, and we'll wrap up soon here. I equate the whole messaging issue. I'm going to go back to the origins of Obamacare to identify problems that progressives have in this country. I can remember I had this debate ad nauseum with people who were screaming about government-sponsored health care. And I would say to them, rather than scream and shout, I would say to them, well, let me give you an example. My son and daughter-in-law are self-employed. Therefore, they do not have access to employee-sponsored health care.
Right.
My grandson was born with a very serious health issue that has required multiple, we're up to about 20, I think, surgeries. And it would cost well over $1 million. And because he has that pre-existing condition, they will never be able to get health care. Every person that I had that discussion with said to me, well, that's not right. That's
right.
That's not right.
This is America.
That shouldn't be and I would look at them and I'd say, I know it's not right. That's the point. And it's so in your lap. I mean, I know because you've had those same discussions. And it's remarkable to me that on almost every single issue, almost everyone, the public agrees with the Democratic position. But because the Republicans are able to say, do you think we stand with parents? We're going to take over school. Well, of course I stand with parents. So that wins. They come up with these 2 or 3 simple Simon slogans.
Well, what does that tell you? I mean, one of the things, there's 2 problems here. A, the Democrats in many ways have lost how to fight, including Biden. Biden comes off as says, I'm a fighter. I'm from Scranton. Well, he doesn't know how, he's not doing a very good job fighting on the political inside at all. Democrats have lost how to make the simplistic arguments, to make the simple arguments in media, in social media. And they should be, Democrats, and I've said this to a bunch of folks already on the Hill. I said, look, what's up with you guys?
They must be sick of you and me.
Yeah.
They see a call from Steiner and Moeller and they go, oh, for God's sake.
I said, not those guys again.
You should be organizing massive social media campaigns and TV campaigns and literature campaigns that really succinctly and simply say what you have to say and don't use progressive jargon. Talk like people talk.
Like normal people, Mark. I write about it all the time. Talk like normal people.
Exactly. And because people will come over because they already agree, but it's the way you don't present, you don't fight. And when you do present, it's like some ethereal thing that people can't put their heads around.
If you say to people, Mark, again, we got to have you back real soon. But if you say to people, would it make a difference in your life or people that you knew if we had truly universal childcare in this country that would allow women, husbands and wives and couples and gay couple, whatever, who have children to send their children to have pre childcare so that they go, God, yeah, I'm for that. Well, let's just say that.
And you can see, and the thing with that
well,
is,
let me be a Republican. Who's going to pay for it?
we are the American people, and corporations are going to pay for it. People need to pay their fair share.
Because Mark, wait a minute, hold on, Mark, Nestor. Because right now this goes back to Mark's point about talking turkey with people. Say to them, what are you paying now? They're paying thousands and thousands.
Well, Obama did this with Obamacare, right? Like, can you get insurance? No. Well, now you can. How much? Better than it used to be. Oh, well, that's a Democratic idea. We don't like that. That we can't have that. I mean, that felt to be an argument we've had like over the last half of my life about whether it's a birthright, whether it's an American, whether we should all have health insurance, because we certainly all need it, as you've pointed out in the beginning of this, right? Your grandson needs it. He has to have it or he won't live.
Yes. I mean, look, I was thinking about what you yourself said earlier. I mean, and I know you got to go to another segment here, so just shut me up. But I mean, you know, when you talk about daycare, when you were talking about when Don was talking, when you were talking about daycare a moment ago, I mean, that's an easy thing to do. And you can even say, look, so people have this thing in their head because they're Americans about, I don't want the government running everything. That's part of the American consciousness. Yes, it is. So, but if you say daycare for everybody, that everyone needs to pay their fair share of taxes because the wealthy and the corporations are not paying their fair share of taxes in this country, then that's a rallying cry that the Democrats should be using, and they're not using it.
Even Joe Manchin agrees with you on that.
The right and the left will agree on that. It's regular citizens, because that rankles everybody. But the daycare industry itself doesn't have to be run by the government. The daycare industry, you could be invested in private companies doing the work, people in their homes doing the work. We can make it an American institution. It doesn't have to be run by the state of Maryland. It can be run by Don Moeller's grandmother if she was still here. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could be
right.
You know,
I couldn't agree more. Mark, all of these issues, and the last thing on the organizing, and boy, this is where we need the Steiners of a new generation. The fact that Democrats in the past election got out organized in Southern Florida in communities of color because they didn't show up for the 3 or 4 years ahead of time working the community. It's malpractice, Mark. It's malpractice.
I mean, the DNC should be investing its money in training organizers around the country and paying for them to get out and get the vote out and get things organized. That's
absolutely.
Baltimore growing up, and you'll remember this, Don, too. I think that remember growing up, and maybe you will, Nestor, that Baltimore had a series of political clubs across the city. Every neighborhood had a political club. They were often ethnically designed. They were Jewish, and they were Ukrainian, and they were Polish, and they were black, and they were, you know, it was that was just the nature of how Baltimore was then.
I'm familiar with a lot of the Polish ones because I grew up in East Baltimore. Polish Home
right.
Association. Right. Yeah.
But every neighborhood everybody had them. Everybody had them. So, but the Democrats have to go back and tweak that and think we need to have political organizations in communities across the country that help people wade through the process of government when you need something, but also organize people to vote and organize people to fight. I mean, they need to really think differently about how they're doing this, and they're not. It's really frustrating watching how the Democrats operate because it's just.
And on that note, Nestor, the legendary Mark Steiner. Mark, we've got hours to do. We will have you back on very soon, maybe even in person. But
as long as you wear that jacket, dude, that is a professor like that.
This jacket is so bloody old, man. This is an old jacket.
That just screams crazy professor to me. I love it. That's what you are around here. Marc Steiner, our crazy uncle professor around here, checking in on the Marc Steiner show. What else are you working on? Give a little plug for where folks can find you and things you're doing right now.
I'm on steinershow.org. My show comes out also on the Real News, a weekly podcast, both video and audio. And look for a couple of things coming out on the future of Baltimore and on the rise of the right. Are be two big pieces I'm working on.
All
we,
right, well,
we want to have you back to talk about all that very soon,
And a
Mark.
positive look
Thanks
at the
as
future of
always,
Baltimore.
and tell Valerie to keep those great pictures coming.
I will, and we all have to have. You got to stop posting all these food things because
I know.
crash.
I know. He
That's
put that prime rib up at Beaumont this
God.
week and almost got me out in the Beltway.
Oh, it was terrible.
We're going to have the crab cake tour. It's all presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We're going to let ourselves play beginning this week. Mama's on the half shell this week. Next week, make a plan with us on Thursday afternoon, 2 until 5. We'll be at El Guapo having crab cakes and margaritas, amongst other things. Probably crab tacos.
Where's El Guapo?
Yeah. El Guapo's
Where's El-
Catonsville. You know where it is, right in the 21228, right across the
I'll
street
be
from
there.
State Fair. All right, there we go. Next Thursday. So, and then we're going to be on Friday the 18th at Costas from 2 until 5. That is a March Madness Friday and the day after St. Patrick's Day. And then we're doing a Wednesday morning show on the 23rd at Fadley's, all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. On behalf of former Baltimore County Executive Don Moeller and Marc Steiner, I am Nestor Aparicio. We are WNST, AM 1570, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. I just said that twice, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.